anything like that, you go ahead and ask. You know, as I said, it's not Jumu'ah khutbah, so you can go ahead and ask. There'll be a lot of interaction ideally. Now, one of the main reasons we come for this walking tour, not just walking tour for the ziyarat in the morning, is to actually begin connecting ourselves to the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. So we can begin contextualizing, not just Medina in general, but the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ as much as possible, in order to connect ourselves to his legacy. Because from a political point of view and a historical point of view as well, if you want to destroy any civilization, you see, the first thing that people do to destroy any civilization is to cut them off from their heritage. They get rid of their language, and so as a result of that, they'll get rid of their culture. The reason we come here for these excursions that we have here is to contextualize the seerah and to connect ourselves to our heritage. Now, as you see these boundaries here particularly, can anybody point out? Anybody point out? Does anybody know how big Medina was during the time of Prophet ﷺ?
This boundary.
So you remember early on when I said Medina has a few different meanings. It has the sanctuary of Medina, it has the Medina, the city of the Prophet ﷺ. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was just this big. That's how small Medina was. So it's made up of different villages that were around Medina. So this was one village here, Masjid-e-Nabwi is a different village. People are saying all the masajid that you went to early on had different villages. Now pretty much in terms of the original Medina is covered by the masjid itself, with a few exceptions. So Medina was slightly wider on the eastern side over there towards Baqi, and the western side towards this side here that we're going to go see as well. So what happened, travelers would come to Medina, they'll park up their camels, just like you guys have parking lots. So they park up the camels around the outside of Medina and make their way inside Medina. Generally that would happen later on. Now, because of the expansion of the masjid, a lot of the original heritage of Masjid-e-Nabwi has been covered up because of the expansion, but they have preserved a lot, as much as possible. They preserved the locations. They haven't put any signs or anything like that per se, but a lot of the heritage is still around there. So we're going to see a few of those signs. First place I want to point out, you can see over there, gate number 21. So inside the gate number 21, on the left-hand side, is actually a famous well that was there in the time of the Prophet. It's referred to as Bayruha. So the background of Bayruha actually has a beautiful story. It's linked to Abu Talha al-Ansari. So as I mentioned before in the earlier on today in the Ziyarah tour, Medina had a lot of date gardens. Yeah, and you were aware of the heat of Arabia. I understand now we come in the winter, it's not as hot, but generally it's very hot. In the summer it gets to 45, 50 degrees. So especially in midday in Zawal time, it gets really hot. So traditionally Arabs, what they would do, and particularly Prophet ﷺ himself, they would come to these date gardens midday and they would have a siesta, a nap. So the Prophet ﷺ would come to that area over there and he would take his nap a lot of the times as well. And also the reason he chose this specific area because of the well that was there itself. Now Medina had several different wells. You have the famous well of Uthman radiallahu anhu that he bought, and as a result of which he became ghani, which I may talk about that later on. But he had several different wells. Now the wells of these, the water in these wells, some of these wells were sweet and some of these wells were sour. But this particular well here was very sweet, and that's why Prophet ﷺ enjoyed the water from it. And the land around here, as I said, was in a date garden that was owned by Abu Talha al-Ansari radiallahu anhu. Now the background to his story is actually quite beautiful, in that when after the Muhajirin came to Medina, Abu Talha was originally from the people of Medina, he was an Ansari, but he never accepted Islam initially straight away. So when the Muhajirin made their way to Medina and they began mu'akhat and they began intermingling with each other and they began to get to know one another, Abu Talha al-Ansari came to know of a woman by the name of Sulaym, who was the mother of Anas ibn Malik, who was the khadim of the Prophet ﷺ. Her name is also referred as Rumaysa or Rumaysa, but kunya is Sulaym, that's fixed. And she was known for her beauty, she was known to be very beautiful. And this is before the time of the hijab was revealed. So Abu Talha, naturally he proposed to her, and she initially rejected his proposal on a few different bases. One of the bases that she pointed out was that he was a non-Muslim and she was a Muslim woman, and she said that I'm a Muslim woman, I cannot get married to you because you are a non-Muslim. So she initially rejects it. Now Abu Talha al-Ansari, he was known to be a poet and he's known to be very eloquent in his language. So traditionally, and so even to now, modern day time, even today we just discussed it with one of our teachers, Arabs had a lot of affinity and a lot of love for poetry. In Urdu as well, we have the Ash'ar is very, you go to any bayans or anything like that, they always start off with Ash'ar. There's a lot of love for poetry. We don't have it as much in English, but in other Eastern language it's very common. But Arabic in particular, they loved Arabic. They loved Arabic poetry. So Abu Talha al-Ansari was a poet and he was very good. And in those times, just like we see poetry as like music, entertainment. Yes, poetry was a form of entertainment, but it was also a form of social media. So just like nowadays when we want to influence people, we want to get a message across, you have like social media influences that will use Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. to influence people. So that's how Arabic poetry was as well. So when Abu Talha al-Ansari was rejected, his proposal, he was embarrassed. So he started making some different forms of poetry. And he pointed out, and the summary of those poetry was that this woman is nothing more than a gold digger, she's after money, she's a bad person, X, Y, and Z. Now word started spreading amongst the people of Medina, and the whole scenario caused a lot of, you can say, emotional distress to Sulaym. After a while, Abu Talha proposes to her again. Eventually, she considers this proposal. Now she said, I'm willing to accept with one condition. You're still a non-Muslim. Accept Islam, and then I will accept your proposal. So as a result of this, Abu Talha al-Ansari accepts Islam, and now they get married. Now what happens normally when this situation happens to us in the world? I'm talking about now. Somebody accepts Islam and they get married, you think, oh, he's just getting married for the sake of the girl. Yeah, or vice versa. She's just accepting Islam for the sake of the guy. So similar thing happened in that time. People started talking, oh, he's just accepting Islam because he wanted to get married to that beautiful girl. Islam is not firm in his heart, etc. So upon an occasion, as I said, this garden that he owned. Now, the real estate in Saudi Arabia, in this Haram area, even till now, is exceptionally expensive. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, again, similar thing, it was still expensive as well, because everybody understood the importance of the masjid and the closeness to the Prophet ﷺ. Because regularly they would come back to the masjid. Remember, the masjid wasn't just a place of salah, it was the headquarters of the Islamic State. So everyone would go to masjid for a regular basis, not just for salah. They would go there to discuss politics, they would go, the Prophet ﷺ would go there just to consult the Sahaba and discuss battle strategies for war, discuss giving da'wah towards the non-Muslims, etc. So everybody wanted to stay in the close proximity of Masjid-e-Nabwi. And as I said, particularly in Medina, even Medina was very small. That's it. How big is this? I don't know, I'm guessing like a mile square. Maybe, you have to guess 2 miles, I'm guessing, maybe. So the land was very expensive, and it was exceptionally expensive. That well, as I mentioned, Bayruha, was very beloved to the Prophet ﷺ, and is very beloved particularly to Abu Talha al-Ansari. So in Surah Al Imran, the verses were revealed, and it's the beginning of the 4th juz of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. That none of you will achieve piety until you spend a portion of that which you love. So if you love something, and you need to spend a portion of that in the path of Allah, and that will be a means to gain piety. So Abu Talha al-Ansari, he hears this. And the ayat only says, just give a little bit, a portion of it. So Abu Talha al-Ansari, he hears this, and he approaches the Prophet ﷺ, and he says that the most beloved thing to me is this Bayruha, this well that I have here, and the land around it. I made the whole thing sadaqah, for Allah's sake. So he gives it to Allah and His Rasul. To which case the Prophet ﷺ gives the sacrifice, and this is how expensive that is. To which the Prophet ﷺ accepts this, and then he goes, no, I'm going to give it back to you and your family, and waqf. So now the land went back to Abu Talha al-Ansari, and he stayed within his progeny for a long time. Now that well there, as we mentioned, that area, door number 21, if you walk in and take a left, just turn left about 5 meters after the entrance of the door, you can actually see markings of the well. You can actually see markings of the well. It's underneath the carpet area now with the musalla is, but you can still actually see where the well was. Now I'm talking about this expansion of Masjid-e-Nabwi that you see here now happened in the 90s. So only in 1993, I think it was, or the early 90s, was the masjid expanded to this modern day time. So before that, and even I'm talking about teachers' times, like 40, 50 years ago, they pointed out regularly that they would see the actual well itself. So you can actually, are you okay? Okay. This water, you can use water or anything like that. So they could actually see the well themselves, and that's why they would point it out. And generally, a lot of great heritage here as well. You know this, earlier today we went to Mazarat and we saw different parts of Medina, etc. I'm talking about 40, 50 years ago, only this area here around the hotel was considered part of like the central area of Medina. Masjid Qiblatain that we went to early on was considered very far away. Like my teachers would mention as well, if somebody were to propose to a woman that was living in Qiblatain, they would say, why are you getting married to a woman from the other side of the world? And that's a 10-minute drive. Nowadays that's a 10-minute drive from where we are. And they would say that couldn't you find no one else closer to home? That's literally, and now I just came from there within like 5 minutes. So that's in terms of Bayruha. Now this area is one area that I want to show you. Because of construction, so what they've done now is, well, can you see how big Masjid-e-Nabwi is now? So the plan is to make it 3 times as big as it is now. 3 times as bigger. So they started extending it from the eastern side, and then from the western side as well. They've started extending here. So what they're gonna do, eastern side, you can see the cranes, etc. So they started that. Yeah. So for financial reasons, they've cut down on that. They're still gonna do. It's just very slowed down. Yeah. So these hotels are gonna get destroyed.
Wow.
And also from the eastern side of all the hotels, all those hotels, they have been destroyed already.
Yeah.
They've already been destroyed and they're completely flattened.
Just recently built them.
Yeah, so a lot of these hotels that you see here now, they only plan to have them for like 10, 20, 30, like 30, 40 years time. They already know that from the beginning. It's already known. So even the leasing as well, when they lease it out, it's only temporary basis. Even Makkah as well, the clock tower is not there forever. It's only a limited amount of time. Because they're going to expand the masjid. They're going to expand the masjid.
I wouldn't be surprised if this disappear in 20 years.
Yeah, they're expecting,
15,
as I said.
15,
Yeah, so
15.
as I said, they're going to extend the masjid from the eastern side, western side, and this northern side as well.
Yes.
So all of these hotels will eventually, within the very near future, be destroyed as well.
Yep.
They're actually quite old as well. These hotels are actually quite old. So in this eastern project, they've started it very recently. So what they're going to do is they're going to make this, just like this area here, they have this musalla area here. They're going to do that over there. They're going to make a musalla area over there, and particularly for women as well, to make more space, because the women only have like two main musallas in it.
Yeah.
So you have like one entrance over here, and then you have gate number 25, which is the main entrance.
Complaining about that, yes.
Yeah, so they're gonna extend it. Whether they're gonna, at the moment, the plan is to just make an open platform, so it's gonna be just like it is here now. But eventually, the plan is to extend the actual building of the masjid, eastern, western, and from the northern side. But I think that now, because of the construction, they've stopped us from going there. But you can see where those trees are.
Yeah.
They're going to still look after it. As I mentioned beforehand, as much as possible, the historians did discuss this with the people responsible for Haram and Medina in particular, and they want to preserve as much of Islamic heritage. In that area, they're one of the, you can argue, one of the most significant moments, one of the significant events took place in Islamic history. And it was a moment where the Muslim empire, the Muslim, you can say, whole ummah as a whole, came across a problem, the greatest problem that they could possibly face. A problem that they were prepared for indirectly, but nonetheless it was a huge problem for them, and it was the saddest day in their lives. It was the death of the Prophet ﷺ. So what happened, the background to exactly the events that took place there, was after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Sahaba spent a few days in mourning. And at this stage, the concept of a leader or a Khalifa as we know today, the next leader, wasn't fully discussed, and it wasn't formulated per se. Prophet ﷺ laid down foundations, rulings, but in terms of the application of those rulings, it wasn't fully formulated. Go ahead, you got a question?
I mean, when the Prophet ﷺ died, I mean, Fatah Makkah happened.
Yeah. No, go ahead, don't be shy, go ahead. Most of the people here, your family anyway. Go ahead.
It's okay.
So yeah, Fatah Makkah did happen during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and that happened, you can say, a few years before he passed away, in the 8th year of Hijrah. So when the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina, he was in Medina for 10 years. So in the 8th year, Fatah Makkah happened, and the Prophet ﷺ then came back to Medina, out of love of Medina, because Medina is the best place to be. So you're standing now in the best place on earth.
Oh, that is great. Yes,
That's good. Keep on asking questions. Keep on asking questions. Good. Whatever you have, don't stop asking questions. You know, amongst the Sahaba had different ranks in every form. So some of them were richer than others. Some of them had more knowledge than the others. Amongst the young Sahaba was Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. He was the cousin brother of Prophet ﷺ. He was one of the youngest Sahaba, but he's one of the most knowledgeable. The reason he did that, the reason he accomplished this high level of knowledge was even though he's very young, was that he spent time with the Prophet ﷺ and he asked a lot of questions. And that's why later on, during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, when Umar radiallahu anhu gathered the big Sahaba, knowledgeable, the ulama of his time, and consult big issues. Like he would gather the Ashab Badr, the Shuhada, but not martyrs, but the people who took part in Badr, and he would consult them on the issues. And they approached him and said, okay, why are you bringing such a young boy? He's the same age as our children, and you're bringing him on our level? Why? And then he tested them all, and he tested Ibn Abbas. He said that the surah of إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, he just mentioned surah Fath, it's similar to this. So إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, that the background surah of Fath, what does it mean? What's the background to it? And they said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guaranteeing the Muslims a victory. And he said that's incorrect. Then he asked Ibn Abbas, asked Ibn Abbas, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ فَتْحِ, what is the meaning of the surah? To summarize the surah, he said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving condolences to the Ummah that the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and he confirmed that this is correct. And this is Ibn Abbas, such a young boy, giving this answer. So inshallah, good. Keep on asking questions. Keep on asking questions. What are you
He's
doing?
got one on us.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. So, brilliant question. So this is it. When I said early on, when you ask a question, the barakah comes and you give a lot of ilm as a result of it. So you asked that one question. This is something new that you heard, which is nothing to do with mazhab. I wouldn't have mentioned it at all because you asked the question. I always appropriate. So mashallah. Parents, wherever you are, make a lot of dua. No, generally, wallah, you'll see, especially Umrah, the importance of making dua for parents, the dua for your children. Prophet ﷺ said, the 3 du'as are accepted, there's no doubt. Amongst them is da'watul walid lil walid, so the dua of a parent for the child. And on top of that, da'watul musafir, the dua of a musafir. So now you're musafir and your parent as well. So there's 2 reasons for your dua to be accepted. You come to Holy Land, dua in Makkah and Medina generally is more likely to be accepted, particularly in Makkah. So, and you're going to be in the halat of ihram, the state of ihram when you go. So there's so many reasons for your dua to be accepted. So, take advantage of it. So, okay, so in terms of what took place there. So, as I mentioned, going back to the main discussion that we were having early on. So after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Sahaba were unsure what to do per se. Now they realized they needed to appoint a leader, but they were unsure how to do it. So many different Sahaba gathered here. There's this area here that's referred to as Saqifatu Bani Sa'ida. So remember how I mentioned earlier on the different villages, different tribes. So this was the boundary of Medina, so there was another village. Bani Sa'ida was the name of the village. Now the Sahaba gathered there, only mainly the Ansar of Medina, they gathered there, and they were under the leadership of Sa'd ibn Ubadah. So there were many different tribes. One of the leaders of the tribes was Sa'd ibn Ubadah, and they initially wanted to appoint him as the leader, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the whole believers, make him the first Khalifa of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr radiallahu and Umar radiallahu anhu were sitting in the masjid area. When they heard of this, Umar radiallahu anhu approached Abu Bakr radiallahu and said, there's a major decision taking place here now. You're one of the most senior Sahaba, you need to be there. So they go and they make their way there. It was something spontaneous, it wasn't something like a formal meeting that was planned, it just happened on the spot. So now the Sahaba are gathered there. Among the majority of them are Ansar, people of Medina. There are a few Muhajirin there as well. Now discussion takes place on how to deal politics, basically how to deal with the issue of leadership, who should be the new leader, and how they should go ahead and appoint the new leader. So one of the first suggestion was the minna amirun wa minkum amir. So the Ansar said that we're going to have a leader and you the Muhajirin will have a leader. So anybody who studied business management or leadership, politics, you see that if you have 2 leaders, 2 managers in one organization, then that organization will never succeed. So that's on a small scale business level, let alone on a whole political level. Because bear in mind, the role of the Khalifa will be following the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ wasn't just a spiritual leader, a prophet, as we know him. Yes, he was, but he's also a political leader of the Muslim empire. So they needed someone to become the next political leader, the head of state. So they said that no, so that idea was rejected straight away. Then some of them suggested that Sa'd ibn Ubadah should be the leader. To which case, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu quoted a hadith. Now, what is important when you discuss Abu Bakr radiallahu and in terms of quoting hadith? So remember how I mentioned earlier on that the Sahaba had different levels. Many of them were knowledgeable, some of them more knowledgeable than others. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was one of the most knowledgeable Sahaba. But he wasn't a Sahaba that would quote hadith regularly. So many different Sahaba would quote hadith. For example, I'll give you an example. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu quoted many different hadith. Does anybody know how long Abu Hurairah spent with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Less than 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years. About 4 years. He accepted Islam after Fatah Khaybar. And between that and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passing away was 4 to 5 years, approximately that kind of thing. So he spent a small amount of time with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but yet he narrated the most hadith. Yeah, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu spent the most time with all the Sahaba. He was the first man to accept Islam, and he obviously with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the most intimate of times, just like in Hijrah. Yet he was from the Muqilli hadith, he would hardly narrate hadith. And the reason he did that was his own taqwa and his own ihtiyat, because he didn't want to misinterpret the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and he didn't want to associate words to him directly that he ﷺ never said. So out of caution, it's just his approach that he never would quote hadith that much. And when he would quote hadith as well, many times he would say that he would use general terms that Prophet ﷺ said to the meaning of, and then he would quote the Prophet ﷺ out of his ihtiyat and just to be precautionary. So here at this point he quotes a hadith. So when Abu Bakr quoted hadith, Sahaba knew that it was exact words and he would quote it. He wouldn't quote the hadith unnecessarily. There would be a lot of importance and there's a key reason as to why he would quote a hadith. So now the debate is taking place, discussion is taking place of who to be Amir, and he points out that Prophet ﷺ said, Al-A'immatul Quraysh, that leaders are from Quraysh. Therefore he alludes to the fact that if there's going to be a Khalifa, and we're going to have one Khalifa now, that person needs to be from the Muhajirin, and that person, not just any tribe of Muhajirin, it needs to be from Quraysh, the most senior of all tribes, and the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ. So now a few Sahaba gathered in front of him. He has two Sahaba in front of him. Now Abu Bakr was speaking, and he has Umar radiallahu anhu with him, and he has Aminu Hadi al-Ummah Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah. And he initially selects them both. He says, these two people are my nominations to be the Amir, to be the leader. Now the Sahaba discussing now what to happen. There's noise in the background, discussions going on, and it's at this moment that Umar radiallahu stands up and he comes forward. And Abu Bakr was already grabbing his hand. So he just, you two give me your hand, for example. So imagine me to be Umar radiallahu anh, and I'm guiding your hand. So my hand's on top, and I know where it is. Umar radiallahu anh turns his hand around and places his hand on top of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and he says, "Now I now pledge allegiance to you." So at this moment, Umar radiallahu anh, in front of everyone, is pledging allegiance. That Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, I've now decided you're going to be the Amir, and I want you to be the Amir. Now Umar radiallahu anh was such a personality amongst the Sahaba. We'll just carry on walking this morning now. He's such a personality amongst the Sahaba that whenever he do something, the Sahaba will follow. And that's why one of his names of Al-Faruq, that he accepted Islam and he began to perform Salah openly in Mecca, as a result of which Muslims began to perform Salah openly. So Umar radiallahu anhu appoints Abu Bakr radiallahu as Khalifa over there, and the Sahaba one by one they approach Abu Bakr radiallahu and make him Khalifa. And now Abu Bakr radiallahu became Khalifa, and that took place in that, you can see that tree area, that garden that's over there. Saqifa to 27. Prophet passed away. So within 3 years, at this point, the Prophet hasn't even been buried yet. It hadn't even been buried yet at this point. So initially, so what happened was that now after Abu Bakr then became Khalifa, they came to the discussion of how to bury the Prophet and what to do. And so a few of the close companions, family members of the Prophet buried him, washed him. Now in terms of janazah, just like nowadays we have janazah salah, one janazah salah, everyone prays behind the imam. When the Prophet janazah and the janazah did take place, there was no one form of congregation. What happened was a group of Sahaba would enter the area that the Prophet was, i.e. the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. They performed the janazah salah and move on, and another small group will come. So like that. Then they buried the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we're going to discuss exactly where Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was buried.
So, are they planning to preserve that?
Yeah, the plans they have, they still preserve that area. So that area, the day garden area, that tree area, sorry, is still going to be there. They try their best to do certain things. Obviously, practical reasons they have to expand the masjid, facilitate
Of course.
But a lot of the famous, at least of the famous places in Medina that have to preserve, there's also and you can see as well, a lot of the masajid that really lost a few different masjid. Historically, Muslims have always given a lot of importance to preserving those places that the Prophet ﷺ visited. So a lot of these masajid, especially the Umayyads Empire and Umayyads Empire, and then after them, Abbasi did it somewhat, but mainly the Khilaf Uthmaniyya, the Ottoman Empire, they did a lot of preservation. The actual green dome that you see now, that we're going to see and discuss it, that was designed and built by the Ottomans, and that only came very later on. But in terms of preservation, so example of exact preservation importance that early generations gave towards looking after those areas that the Prophet ﷺ visited was Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu, the son of Umar radiallahu. I'm going to point out where his house was approximately. So Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he was known, even though he, again, one of the young Sahaba, just like Abdullah ibn Abbas. I don't know why I think Abdullah ibn Abbas now, I just think of him now. After that question. MashaAllah. So amongst the Sahaba, there were 4 young Sahaba whose name was Abdullah, and they're known as Al-Abadil. It's a term that's referred to them. So you have Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah Amr ibn As, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr. There were 4 young Abdullahs. There were other Sahaba knowledgeable with Abdullah. The reason these 4 were referred to as Abadil, and particularly these 4, they were young. That's what separated them. So Abdullah ibn Umar, he was young, and he was so meticulous in following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that whenever even he would travel, he would stop in those places the Prophet ﷺ stopped at. He performed salah in the exact location the Prophet ﷺ performed salah. It came to the point where there was one occasion where he would actually count the steps the Prophet ﷺ took from one location to another, and later on he would take the exact number of steps. Even further than that, one occasion where the Prophet ﷺ was traveling and he stopped in an area and he relieved himself. Yeah? And then he carried on his journey. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, on one occasion he was stopped in an area, that same area, and he never needed to relieve himself, but he resembled the position of a person relieving himself, and then carried on. This was meticulous in following the exact literal footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ. So imagine his old habits that he had in terms of personal ibadah. It's absolutely amazing. And likewise, many other Sahaba like that. They would follow the footsteps and do their best to not only locate to resemble the Prophet ﷺ in the ibadat, but also in the place that the ibadat took place. As we refer to later on, in terms of the Rawda, it's actually in the Ustuwana of Aisha radiallahu anha. It's referred to the area that the Prophet ﷺ performed Qiyamul Layl and Tahajjud. And it's over there as well, and I'll point that out later on. One other area as well that I wanted to point out, I'll put it again because this area is blocked off, and they've actually got rid of it, but later on they will be back again. They've got rid of it now. But this area here, so when this was the main area, just behind this gate number 11, this whole area here, this was the main market of Medina in the time of the Prophet, the bazaar. This was the main bazaar, so when the Muslims migrated to Medina, it was a whole, it changed them. Hijrah was a very defining point within Islam. It's something that we don't fully appreciate because we can't fully contextualize as much as individuals, but I really wish to try as much as possible to try and appreciate the differences of what took place before Hijrah and after Hijrah. One of the key differences was the state of economy. So when the Muslims were in Makkah, they were minority and they were few in number and they were oppressed.